The father's justice. Sunday lunch was supposed to be simple, predictable, safe, the kind of quiet ritual that settles into a man's life after everything else has slowed down. I arrived a few minutes early, as I always did. Old habits from the bench never really leave you. The French room at the Adolphus Hotel carried that familiar hush of polished Wealth crystal glasses catching soft light. Silverware, aligned with almost surgical precision, conversations kept just low enough to feel private, but never hidden. My name is Harold George Mitchell, 58 years old, retired federal judge. For 25 years, I sat behind a bench where people lied for a living, where charm was currency, and truth was something you had to drag into the light, piece by piece. I thought I'd seen every kind of deception a person could manufacture. I was wrong, because the most dangerous ones don't walk into a courtroom. They sit across from you at lunch, smiling. Timothy was already there when I arrived. My son, 35, usually composed, precise. The kind of man who measured his words the way engineers measure load-bearing structures. But that afternoon, something was off. His napkin sat untouched in his lap, folded, unfolded, folded again. His smile appeared on command, then vanished just as quickly. Nervous, too nervous for a man who had just gotten engaged 2 weeks ago. And then I saw her. Sophia. She rose smoothly as I approached. Every movement controlled, deliberate, like someone who understood exactly how they were being watched and how to use it. Long dark hair, perfect posture, a dress that didn't just suggest money, it assumed it. "Harold," she said warmly, her voice polished, almost rehearsed. "We're so glad you could join us." There was something beneath it, something that didn't quite match the smile. Her mother sat beside her, Carmen, same eyes, same stillness, watching, calculating, saying nothing, but missing nothing. I took my seat slowly, noting everything the way I always had, the spacing between them, the way Timothy leaned slightly away, not toward, the subtle tension in his shoulders, like a man bracing for impact he couldn't avoid. A waiter appeared. I ordered my usual scotch without thinking. Routine, control. Across the table, Sophia rested her hands lightly on the leather portfolio in front of her, fingertips tapping once, then still. Anticipation. "Timothy and I have some exciting news about the wedding," she said, leaning forward slightly, just enough to command attention, without asking for it. A normal father might have smiled, might have leaned in, asked about dates, venues, flowers. I didn't, because something in the room had already shifted. Not loud, not obvious, but unmistakable. And after a lifetime of watching people try to hide the truth, I had learned to trust that feeling. Sophia didn't reach for Timothy's hand. She reached for the portfolio. Leather, dark, expensive, the kind of object meant to signal seriousness before a single word was spoken. She placed it gently between us, aligning it with the edge of the table as if precision itself could make what came next feel reasonable. "We've been planning our dream wedding," she began, her tone shifting less warmth now, more structure, more control. Not a conversation, a presentation. She opened the portfolio slowly, page after page of glossy images sliding into view, grand ballrooms, cascading flowers, chandeliers dripping with light, typed estimates, clean fonts, numbers arranged neatly, as if order could disguise excess. "And we wanted to discuss the budget with you." Budget. Not ideas, not possibilities. Budget. I said nothing, just reached for my glass as the scotch arrived, letting the silence stretch a fraction longer than comfortable. Across from me, Timothy's fingers tightened around his water glass, the knuckles whitening, betraying what his face tried to hide. Sophia didn't hesitate. "For the wedding we envision, we'll need $500,000. She said it cleanly, confidently, like someone stating a fact, not making a request. 500,000. The number settled into the space between us, heavy, deliberate, waiting to see who would break first. I took a slow sip, letting the burn ground me, then repeated it back. 500,000. A pause, just enough to make her hear it the way I did. "That's quite specific." Her smile sharpened, not wider, sharper. "Oh, it's all very carefully calculated," she said, turning another page, her finger tracing down the columns. 200,000 for the venue, the Rosewood Mansion, 300 guests. It's really the only place that meets our standards. Our standards, another page. 100,000 for floral arrangements and decor. We're flying in cherry blossoms from Japan, of course. And the ice sculptures alone will be around 25,000. Of course. She touched her collarbone lightly, practiced, effortless. My dress will be custom Vera Wang, around 50,000. It's a once-in-a-lifetime piece. Carmen leaned in then, her voice smooth, almost sweet. Our family has certain expectations, Harold. Sophia is our only daughter. Not a suggestion, a standard. I glanced at Timothy. He wasn't looking at Sophia, or at me. His eyes were fixed somewhere just beyond the table, as if distance could make this unreal. And you're sharing this with me because? I asked calmly. Sophia didn't miss a beat. Well, traditionally, the groom's family contributes significantly, she said, her gaze locking onto mine. And Timothy mentioned that you're comfortable. There it was. Not a request for help, an assessment of resources. She leaned back slightly, confidence settling in as she'd already calculated the outcome. And if his family truly cares about him, she added softly, almost gently, they'll want him to start his marriage the right way. The words were light, but the meaning landed heavily. Pay, or prove you don't love your son. Across the table, the air tightened, invisible, but undeniable. And in that moment, I wasn't sitting in a dining room anymore. I was back in a courtroom, watching someone present a story they believed was flawless, waiting for the first crack to appear. I was about to respond, measured, controlled, the way I had done for decades, when something brushed lightly against my knee beneath the table. Subtle, almost accidental, but not quite. Timothy's hand. I didn't look down, didn't break eye contact with Sophia as she continued outlining champagne selections and imported linens, her voice flowing smoothly, rehearsed, confident. Instead, I let my hand fall naturally to my lap, fingers closing around what he had passed me. A small piece of paper, folded once, torn from something ordinary, a notepad maybe. Nothing that would draw attention. Across the table, Carmen's eyes flickered for just a moment, watching, measuring. I smiled faintly. The same polite expression I had worn 1,000 times in courtrooms, in negotiations, in rooms where people believed they were in control. Just taking it all in, I said lightly, as if my thoughts were still on centerpieces and guest counts. Under the table, my thumb traced the surface of the paper. The ink had been pressed hard, deep enough that I could feel the grooves without even unfolding it. Urgent. Desperate. I waited, letting Sophia speak, letting her believe she still owned the moment, because timing had always been everything. Then, without looking down, I shifted the paper slightly, just enough for the edges to open beneath my hand. My thumb moved slowly across the words, letter by letter, feeling them before I fully saw them. D-A-D. A pause. My chest tightened, not visibly, not yet. S-H-E-S. The room seemed to narrow, the soft clink of silverware fading into something distant, irrelevant. A-C-A-M-M-E-R-R-M-M-M-M-M. The last word hit harder than the rest. Not because of the letters, but because of the pressure behind them. He had carved that word into the paper, pushed it down like it needed to reach me through more than just ink. L-E-A-S-I-Z-E-H-L-P. 6 words. That was all it took. 6 words to turn a polite Sunday lunch into something else entirely. I looked up, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time since I had arrived, I really looked at my son. Not the composed professional he presented to the world, but the man sitting in front of me right now. The faint shadows under his eyes I had dismissed before. The tension in his jaw. The way his shoulders held just a little too tight, as if he had been carrying something alone for far too long. How long had this been happening? How much had I missed? Across from him, Sophia was still speaking, still smiling, still building her perfect, polished narrative. But now, I could see it. The precision, the calculation, The way every word was placed exactly where it needed to be, not to share, but to guide, to pressure, to close in. I had seen this before. Different faces, different settings, same pattern. And in that moment, something old stirred inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, sharper, the part of me that had spent 25 years listening to lies and knowing exactly when to let them continue. I folded the paper back carefully, as if it meant nothing, as if everything was still normal. Then I lifted my glass, took a slow, steady sip, and smiled, because the moment I showed my hand, I would lose control, and I had no intention of losing anything. Once you've spent enough years watching people lie, you stop listening to what they say, and you start watching how they say it. Sophia was still talking, still painting that immaculate picture of a perfect wedding, but now the edges were sharper. I could hear the rhythm beneath the words, the structure behind the charm. It wasn't a conversation. It was a sequence. Step 1. Establish the dream. Step 2. Attach a price to it. Step 3. Make the price feel inevitable. I had seen it before, not in ballrooms or luxury hotels, but in courtrooms, under oath, where the stakes were just as high and the masks just as polished. There had been a case, years ago, a woman who convinced 3 different men to invest their life savings into a wellness resort that never existed. She didn't start with numbers. She started with vision, peace, beauty, escape. By the time the money entered the conversation, the victims weren't evaluating risk anymore. They were protecting a dream they had already bought into. Sophia was doing the same thing. Her voice softened when she described the ceremony, slowed just enough to make each detail linger. The imported flowers, the curated guest list, the exclusivity of it all. Then, almost imperceptibly, she would pivot. To make that happen, to ensure the experience is right. To meet expectations, each phrase, a bridge, leading back to the same number, 500,000. But the number wasn't the real pressure. The pressure was emotional. I watched the way she glanced at Timothy, not often, but precisely when it mattered. When he hesitated, when his silence stretched too long, a hand placed gently over his, a soft smile, a quiet, almost tender question. You want this too, don't you? Not a question, a cue. And Timothy, God help him, responded exactly the way she needed him to, uncertain, but compliant. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, not yet. Something closer to recognition. Because this wasn't just persuasion. This was conditioning. Another case surfaced in my mind. A financial exploitation trial that had taken nearly 2 years to untangle. The defendant had isolated her victim slowly, never all at once. A comment here. A suggestion there. Your friends don't really understand you. Your family might not support us. Bit by bit, the victim's world shrank, until the only voice that mattered was hers. I shifted slightly in my chair, studying Timothy again. The signs were there. Subtle, but undeniable. The way he deferred before speaking. The way he glanced at Sophia before answering even the simplest question, as if checking whether his words were acceptable. That wasn't love. That was permission. Across the table, Carmen remained mostly silent, but her presence filled the gaps Sophia left behind. When Sophia pushed too far, Carmen softened it. When doubt flickered, Carmen reframed it. A system, not a coincidence. 2 roles, perfectly aligned. I had seen partnerships like this before, one leading, one reinforcing, both moving toward the same outcome with quiet precision. Sophia leaned forward again, her tone shifting slightly, less polished now, more pointed. I would think, she said, her voice still smooth but carrying something colder underneath, that for your only son's wedding, no expense would be too great. There it was, the turn, the moment where the request stopped being about the wedding and became about me, my judgment, my love for my son. In court, this was where inexperienced attorneys failed. They overplayed their hand too early, pushed too hard, revealed the strategy before the foundation was secure. But Sophia, she was careful. The accusation wasn't direct. It didn't need to be. It lingered in the air between us, unspoken, but understood. If I refused, I wasn't just declining a financial request. I was failing as a father. I let the silence stretch, just long enough for the weight of her words to settle. Then I took another slow sip of my drink, letting the burn cut through the moment. Because now I could see it clearly, not just the demand, not just the number, but the entire structure behind it. The dream, the pressure, the isolation, the subtle rewriting of loyalty into obligation. It was all there, layered, deliberate, practiced. And the most dangerous part wasn't how obvious it was to me. It was how invisible it must have been. To him, that evening the house felt different, quieter than usual but not peaceful. Timothy sat across from me in my study, shoulders slightly hunched, hands clasped together as if he were holding something fragile or trying to keep it from falling apart. I had seen that posture before, not in boardrooms, not in celebrations, in witnesses, in victims, men who realized too late that what they had trusted wasn't what they thought it was. "It didn't start like this," he said finally, his voice low, careful. "She wasn't like this in the beginning. They never are." I poured him a glass of whiskey, set it gently in front of him, gave him space to speak. "It was small things at first," he continued, staring at the amber liquid as if the answers might be somewhere inside it. "Normal things. Her car broke down, a BMW. She was stressed, embarrassed, didn't want to ask, but I insisted. How much? 12,000. He didn't look up when he said it. Just let the number sit there, like it had been sitting with him for weeks. And then, a few weeks later, her mom needed help. Medical bills. Something urgent. Something they couldn't cover in time. His jaw tightened slightly. 8,000. The pattern was already forming. Not random. Never random. "Did you see the bills?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "She said it was complicated. Insurance issues. Paperwork delays. I didn't want to push." Of course, he didn't. That was the point. He took a slow breath, steadying himself before continuing. "Then there was an investment. A boutique business. Her friend's company. She said it was a great opportunity. Limited window. How much? 15,000, $35,000. 8 months. Each payment wrapped in urgency, in emotion, in just enough justification to feel reasonable if you didn't step back and look at the whole picture." I leaned back slightly, letting the silence stretch. "And the accounts?" I asked. That made him pause. His fingers tightened around the glass. "She said her friend handled the financial side, gave me routing numbers, account details. Not her accounts, never directly hers." I nodded slowly. "Did you ever meet this friend?" "No." "Visit the business?" "No." "See any contracts?" Another shake of the head. The room felt heavier now, the air thick with realization. "I thought," he started, then stopped. "I thought I was being supportive," he said finally, his voice cracking just slightly. "She made it feel like this was what a good partner does." There it was. Not just financial manipulation, identity manipulation. She hadn't just asked for money, she had redefined what it meant to be a good man, and then measured him against it. "And when you hesitated?" I asked. His expression changed. Subtle, but unmistakable. "She got upset," he said quietly. "Not immediately, but eventually. Said I didn't trust her. That her last relationship failed because of financial insecurity. That she needed to feel safe." Safe. The word echoed, hollow. "And the wedding?" He let out a short, humorless laugh. "That's when it changed," he said. "When I suggested something smaller, more reasonable." He hesitated. "She threw a glass," he finished, "against the wall. Then she apologized, cried, said she was under pressure, that her mother expected a certain standard. Escalation. Always escalation. Push, pull, reward, punish, until the line between choice and obligation disappears." I studied him for a long moment, seeing not just what had happened, but how it had happened. Carefully, gradually, deliberately. $35,000 wasn't the real loss. It was the conditioning behind it, the slow erosion of judgment, the quiet reshaping of trust into compliance. And the most dangerous part was that he still wasn't angry, not at her, at himself. I should have seen it. he said, almost to himself. I leaned forward slightly, my voice steady. No, I said. She made sure you wouldn't, because this wasn't about a few bad decisions. It was about a system designed to make those decisions feel like love. The next time we sat across from each other, the tone had changed. Not on the surface, the same table, the same polished setting, the same careful smiles, but underneath, something sharper had taken hold. Sophia still believed she was in control. That was her first mistake. I let her speak first, let her walk back into the narrative she had built, as if nothing had shifted. The portfolio returned, the same pages, the same numbers, presented with even more confidence now, as if repetition alone could make them real. I've refined the budget, she said smoothly. We've spoken with the planner again. Everything is aligned. Aligned. Such a clean word for something built on air. I waited, just long enough for the silence to become uncomfortable. Then I set my glass down gently, deliberately. Good, I said. One word. Calm, neutral, almost agreeable. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly. And then, prove it. The word didn't rise, didn't sharpen. It simply landed. Flat. Final. Sophia blinked. Not dramatically. Just once, but it was enough. I'm sorry, she said, her voice still composed, but no longer effortless. Prove it, I repeated. Prove that this wedding costs $500,000. A pause. Longer this time. Carmen shifted beside her. Barely noticeable, but there. I leaned forward, just enough to close the distance. Show me the vendor contracts, I continued. Signed agreements, company names, tax identification numbers, payment structures, timelines. Each word placed carefully, like evidence entering the record. If the number is real, the documentation will be real. Sophia's smile flickered, not gone, but unstable. It's not about paperwork, Harold, she said, a trace of irritation slipping through. It's about trust, about family. There it was again, the pivot, from facts to feelings. I didn't follow her there. When someone asks me for $500,000, I said evenly, it is absolutely about paperwork. Silence, not polite this time, heavy, pressurized. I could see her recalculating, shifting through strategies. Charm had failed, softness had failed. Now, she was searching for something else. Maybe this was a mistake, she said suddenly, her voice trembling just enough to feel real. Maybe Timothy and I should just elope, save everyone the trouble. A retreat, but not a surrender. A test. I glanced at Timothy. His hand moved slightly toward hers, then stopped, caught between instinct and realization. Good. He was starting to see it. I reached into my jacket, pulled out my phone, and placed it on the table. You have 72 hours, I said. The words cut clean through the room. 3 days to provide complete documentation for every dollar you're requesting, every vendor, every contract, every estimate. I tapped the screen once, setting a reminder. If this is legitimate, proving it will be simple. Carmen's composure cracked first. This is insulting, she snapped. The sweetness gone completely now. No, I said calmly. This is due diligence. I stood, slowly, giving them just enough time to feel the shift, the loss of control, the collapse of the script they thought they were running. 72 hours, I repeated. After that, we proceed accordingly. Sophia said nothing, but the look in her eyes had changed. No longer confident, no longer composed. For the first time since I had met her, she looked uncertain, and in that moment, I knew the truth was already closer than she realized. The moment you suspect a pattern, you don't wait for confirmation. You go looking for it. The next morning I made a call I hadn't needed in years. Gregory Allen Cooper, private investigator, meticulous to a fault. The kind of man who understood that truth isn't found in statements, it's buried in records, in connections, in what people try to hide between transactions. When he answered, I didn't waste time. I need everything, I said. Background, financials, prior relationships, 2 names, a pause on the line, then a quiet exhale. Official or personal? Personal, I replied. But treat it like a case. He understood what that meant. 5 days for preliminary results, 2 weeks for full documentation. I didn't need 2 weeks, because patterns, when they exist, don't take long to surface. While Gregory worked, I built the frame around it. Called in a lawyer, Charles Barnes, someone who knew how to turn suspicion into something admissible, something undeniable, because this wasn't just about being right, it was about being precise. 72 hours came and went. No contracts, no documentation, only a message. Carefully worded, deliberately vague. The planner says verbal agreements are standard at this level. Deposits come first. Of course they do. I saved the message. Evidence doesn't always look like proof at first, but it becomes proof when placed in the right sequence. On the 5th day, Gregory called. No greeting, no hesitation. You were right. 3 words, delivered flat, like a verdict already reached. Sofia Elena Martinez, he continued, also known as Sofia Christine Gutierrez, 32 years old, 3 prior engagements in the last 7 years. I didn't speak, just listened. All ended 2 to 3 weeks before the wedding date, he said. All involved significant financial transfers tied to wedding planning. There it was, not an incident, a system. First case, Houston. Arthur Thompson, tech entrepreneur, lost $65,000. I closed my eyes briefly, not in disbelief, but in recognition. Second, Austin. Leonard Wilson, real estate developer, $72,000. Same pattern, luxury wedding, vague documentation, escalating deposits. The numbers were different. The method was not. And the third? I asked. Gregory paused, just for a fraction of a second. San Antonio, Vincent Rodriguez, investment banker, $58,000. He pushed back, hired a lawyer. Of course he did. What did he find? 9 of the vendors listed in the wedding plan didn't exist, Gregory said. Shell companies, bank accounts tied back through shared addresses, phone numbers, all connected to Carmen Martinez. The mother, not supporting the operation, running it. I stood slowly, moving toward the window, looking out at a world that suddenly felt a little sharper, a little colder. And the victims? I asked. I have contact information for all 3, Gregory replied. Whether they'll talk is another question. They would, because men who lose money can walk away, but men who realize they were manipulated, they remember. I thanked him, ended the call, and stood there for a moment longer than necessary. 3 engagements, 3 identical outcomes, 3 men who thought they were building a future, only to discover they had been financing a lie. And now, my son. The pattern didn't just repeat, it evolved. The amounts shifted, the pressure adjusted, but the core remained untouched. Create the dream, control the narrative, extract the money, disappear before the truth arrives. I turned back toward my desk. Gregory's report is already waiting in my inbox. Pages of connections, transactions, timelines aligning with a precision that no coincidence could explain. This wasn't a suspicion anymore. It wasn't even an investigation. It was confirmation, and confirmation changes everything. Fraud, at its core, is never about creativity. It's about structure. The illusion may change the names, the faces, the setting, but underneath, the machinery stays the same. I sat at my desk, Gregory's report spread open in front of me. Pages of data, cross-references, transaction trails, the kind of quiet evidence that doesn't shout, but doesn't lie either. And the deeper I went, the cleaner it became. 15 vendors are listed in Sofia's wedding plan. 15. On paper, it looked impressive, diversified, detailed, legitimate. But when Gregory began pulling the threads, 8 of them simply disappeared. No registration, no business licenses, no tax records, nothing. Not hidden, non-existent. The remaining 7 were real companies. That was the clever part, because legitimacy doesn't need to be complete, it just needs to be believable. But when he called them posing as a client, a curious third party, the answers came back the same. No contracts, no bookings, no record of any Sofia Martinez. A perfect blend of truth and fabrication. Just enough reality to anchor the lie. But the real story wasn't in the names. It was in the money. Every payment Timothy had made, every transfer tied to those vendors followed the same path. Different account numbers, different recipient names. But when Gregory traced them back, the lines began to converge. Shared mailing addresses, overlapping phone numbers, accounts opened within days of each other, then closed just as quickly. Shell structures, layered just enough to confuse, not enough to withstand scrutiny. And at the center of it all, Carmen, not directly, never directly, but close enough that the pattern became impossible to ignore. Properties registered under variations of her name, contact numbers linked across multiple accounts, digital fingerprints that aligned too precisely to be a coincidence. This wasn't a woman supporting her daughter's wedding plans. This was infrastructure. Designed, refined, repeated. I leaned back slowly, letting the pieces settle into place. Because this wasn't just theft, it was choreography. Create vendors that don't exist. Mix in real ones to mask the absence. Route payments through controlled accounts. Dissolve everything before the questions begin. And when the pressure builds, walk away. Leave behind confusion, embarrassment, just enough doubt to keep the victim from pushing further. I had seen versions of this before, but rarely this clean. Rarely is this disciplined. No random mistakes. No emotional slips. Every move calculated. Every layer serving a purpose. Until now. Because the moment someone starts asking for documentation, the entire structure begins to strain. Paperwork demands permanence. And permanence is the one thing a system like this cannot afford. I closed the report gently, fingertips resting on the final page. The evidence wasn't just strong, it was complete. Accounts, connections, patterns, everything aligned with a precision that left no room for interpretation. This wasn't a suspicion anymore, it was architecture. And now that I could see the design, I knew exactly where it would break. The address Sophia sent was real, at least on the surface. Design district, clean lines, polished glass, the kind of place where appearances carry weight. But suite 140, empty, no signage, no staff, no movement. Just a temporary placard taped to the door, slightly crooked, as if even the illusion had been assembled in a hurry. I stepped inside first. Beige carpet, white walls, a folding table, 3 chairs, nothing else. No samples, no portfolios, no life. Behind me, Timothy hesitated, then followed. Charles stood to my right, briefcase in hand, silent, recording everything without drawing attention. And then, the sound of heels. Sharp, fast, controlled, but not calm. Sophia entered first. Carmen was just behind her. For a moment. They paused. Just a moment, because even the best performers need a second when the stage doesn't match the script. Michelle must be running late, Sophia said quickly, forcing brightness into her voice. She mentioned something about moving offices. Of course she did. I set my briefcase down, opened it slowly, deliberately. No need, I said. 2 words. And this time, they carried weight. Sophia's smile faltered, not gone, but no longer stable. Let's start with your wedding planner, I continued, pulling out the first document. Michelle Rodriguez. According to the Texas Business Registry, she doesn't exist. Silence. Real silence. Not polite, not social. The kind that fills a room when something begins to collapse. Carmen shifted first, a step back, instinctive. That's ridiculous, she said sharply. Of course she exists. Then she should be easy to find, I replied calmly, sliding the paper across the table. Licensed professionals tend to leave records. Sophia didn't touch it. Her eyes moved instead, quick, calculating, searching for an angle that wasn't there anymore. I didn't give her time. Let's talk about your vendors, I said, pulling out another sheet. 15 listed, 8 of them, non-existent. The remaining 7, real companies, none of which have any record of working with you. Her breath caught. Just slightly. Enough. Those are preliminary, she began. Shell companies. I cut in. My tone still level, still controlled. Accounts routed through shared addresses, connected back to Carmen Martinez. I let the name hang. Heavy. Final. Carmen's composure cracked. You don't know what you're talking about, she snapped, but the edge in her voice betrayed her. I know exactly what I'm talking about, I said quietly. Then I reached into the briefcase again, pulled out the next file, thicker this time. Arthur Thompson, I read. Houston, $65,000. Engagement ended 2 weeks before the wedding. Sophia's eyes widened just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Leonard Wilson, Austin, $72,000. Same pattern. Carmen's hand tightened at her side. And Vincent Rodriguez, San Antonio, $58,000. The only one who asked questions early. I stepped closer, closing the distance between us. 3 engagements, 3 identical outcomes, same structure, same execution. Sophia's voice broke through sharp, desperate. You can't prove any of that. I met her gaze, steady, unmoved. I already have. A pause. Then I pulled out my phone, turned the screen toward them. Contact name, Assistant District Attorney, Financial Crimes Division. 15 years of working cases together, 1 call away. You have a choice, I said quietly. The room felt smaller now, tighter, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to listen. You can walk out of here, and this becomes a formal investigation by morning. I let the words settle. Or, you can leave, and never contact my son again. Sophia's mask shattered. Not gradually. Not subtly. Instantly. You arrogant, she started, her voice rising, control gone completely. Your son was nothing special. Just another man with money and something to prove. There it was. The truth. Stripped of performance. I didn't react. Didn't need to. Thank you, I said softly. Charles shifted slightly beside me, the recording still running. Carmen grabbed Sophia's arm, pulling her back toward the door. Let's go, she hissed. No argument this time. No performance. Just retreat. Their footsteps echoed sharply as they left. Faster now. Uneven. No longer controlled. And then, silence. I stood there for a moment, letting it settle. Behind me, Timothy hadn't moved. I turned slowly, met his eyes. Shock. Relief. Something else. Something quieter. Understanding. The illusion hadn't just cracked. It had collapsed. Completely. 2 days later, it was over. Not with drama, not with drawn-out denials, but with evidence. Stacked clean, undeniable, precise, recorded statements, financial trails. Prior victims are willing to speak. Faced with all of it, Sophia pleaded guilty. Wire fraud, 12 years in federal prison. Carmen followed. 15 years, her history catching up with her at last. No more performances, no more carefully constructed illusions, just consequences, arriving exactly where they were always heading. Timothy sat across from me again that evening, but this time, the tension was gone. Not replaced with relief, not immediately something quieter first. Clarity. The kind that comes after a storm, when the noise fades, and you finally see what was always there. I almost married her, he said softly. I nodded. Yes, I replied. You almost did. No judgment. Because the truth is, no one falls for something like that because they're foolish. They fall for it because they care, because they want to believe. I leaned back, studying him for a moment. The problem wasn't the money, I said. It was the condition. He looked up. Anyone who ties love to a price isn't offering love. A pause. They're setting a transaction. The room settled into silence again, but this time, it wasn't heavy. It was steady, because some lessons don't come from advice. They come from seeing the truth, too clearly to ignore. So if there's anything worth remembering from all of this, it's simple. Real love doesn't demand proof through money. It shows itself through consistency, respect, and the ability to accept the word no without turning it into a weapon. If this story stayed with you, then carry that forward, because sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is refusing to pay for something that should have been real to begin with.